It's longer than 2 football fields. It carries more missiles than any destroyer in the American fleet. And worst of all, it's made in China. Beijing is launching these Type 55 destroyers at a pace the US simply cannot match. The Chinese Navy is now the largest in the world, and the gap is getting wider every year. But as Washington scrambles for a solution, it has so far overlooked an interesting possibility. The best warships in the world are already out there, and they're low cost, fast to build, and fully equipped to go toe-to-toe with China's finest. They're just not where anyone's been looking for them. For most of the 20th century, China's Navy was an afterthought. It was a coastal defense force, a collection of aging vessels designed to keep enemies away from Chinese shores, not to project power across open oceans. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the US Navy was left virtually unchallenged in the Pacific. But that would soon change. Beginning in the 1990s, Beijing embarked on one of the most ambitious naval expansion programs in modern history. It poured hundreds of billions of dollars into new ships, new shipyards, and new technology. It recruited engineers, poached expertise, and built production lines that had no equivalent in the Western world. Within 3 decades, China had transformed its navy from a regional patrol force into a global fleet. The clearest symbol of that transformation is the Type 55 destroyer. Stretching nearly 600 feet from bow to stern and displacing up to 13,000 tons when fully loaded, it's so large and so heavily armed that NATO analysts don't believe it should be called a destroyer at all. In Western military assessments, it's classified as a cruiser, a category of warship the United States retired years ago. Its 112 vertical launch shells can fire a mix of surface-to-air missiles, anti-ship missiles, and land attack cruise missiles in any combination, giving a single ship the ability to dominate an enormous stretch of ocean. China began building the Type 55 in 2014, running construction simultaneously at 2 shipyards. By the end of 2022, 8 were already in active service. Today, 10 are operational, with more under construction and a planned fleet of 16. China's Navy now stands at over 340 warships, while the United States has fewer than 300. And while Pentagon analysts project China's fleet will reach 400 within 2 years, the most optimistic projections suggest that it will take the US until 2045 to even hit 350. Some experts estimate that China can build warships 3 times faster than the US. In 2023, then US Navy Secretary Carlos del Toro put the industrial reality in stark terms. Quote, "They have 13 shipyards. In some cases, 1 shipyard has more capacity than all of our shipyards combined. That presents a real threat." Of course, Washington hadn't planned it this way. Around the same time as the Chinese began their naval expansion in the 1990s, the US started putting together its own vision for a 21st century fleet. The battle-proven, multi-mission Arleigh Burke-class destroyer had been in production since 1991, but by the middle of the decade, it was preparing something radically different, a next-generation destroyer that would be stealthy enough to disappear from enemy radar screens and carry powerful new guns, capable of hurling precision-guided shells over 80 miles. It would be designed for the conflicts of the future, not just open ocean warfare, but the shallow coastal waters expected to soon become the main stage of maritime combat. The Navy planned to build 32 of these vessels. The program went through years of evolution, changing names, shifting requirements, growing in ambition and complexity. What finally emerged was the Zumwalt-class destroyer. With its radical, inward-sloping hull, it looked like nothing the Navy had ever built. Despite being larger than any active US destroyer or cruiser, the ship's radar signature was reportedly no bigger than that of a small fishing boat. On paper, it looked set to guarantee American naval supremacy well into the 21st century. But almost from the moment construction began, the program started to unravel. The centerpiece of the Zumwalt's firepower was a pair of advanced gun systems, 6-inch guns designed to hit that 80-mile target. But as costs climbed and the number of planned ships shrank, the per-shell price for the specially designed ammunition climbed with them, eventually reaching nearly $1 million per shell. The Navy canceled the ammunition program entirely. The guns were rendered useless and have since been physically removed from all 3 ships. The cost overruns were staggering. What had been projected as a $1.4 billion per ship program eventually priced out at over $7 billion per vessel. The planned run of 32 ships was cut to 24, then to 7, and finally to just 3. In November 2016, the lead ship made headlines, not for any combat achievement, but for breaking down in the Panama Canal on its very first major deployment. Defense writer Mark Friedenberg summed it up plainly, quote, "A ship without a mission." Washington now had to face an uncomfortable reality. In roughly the same period in which China had built 10 of the most powerful warships on the planet, with plenty more set to come, the U.S. had spent over $22 billion in the better part of 2 decades on a program that produced 3 vessels the Navy didn't quite know what to do with. To make matters worse, the Zumwalt class was not the only 21st century American naval program to have run into major difficulties. In the 2000s, the Littoral Combat Ship was designed as a smaller, faster vessel, designed for coastal operations that would cost a fraction of the price of a destroyer and could be built quickly in large numbers. It was an innovative concept, designed for a new era of warfare in shallow, contested waters. But the program struggled almost from the start. The ships proved prone to mechanical failures and were found to be ill-suited for combat against any serious adversary. Some were decommissioned, having served barely a decade of an expected 30-year lifespan. By 2023, the Navy was publicly citing its inability to perform core missions as justification for retiring them altogether, though this decision has since been reversed to allow them to be repurposed for secondary roles, such as mine clearing, in the face of the growing Chinese threat. More recently, another U.S. naval program that failed to deliver was a Constellation-class frigate. Based on a proven Italian design, it was supposed to be cheaper and faster to build than a destroyer, while still packing a meaningful punch. Construction on the lead ship began in April 2024, but by November 2025, with the vessel only 12% complete and its design not yet finalized, the Navy canceled all but the first 2 ships. The reason given was a need for designs that could be constructed more rapidly. A new frigate program has since been announced to replace it, but it's likely still several years away from deployment. For now, the Navy continues to produce the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. Still the backbone of the U.S. surface fleet, the Navy plans to build 99 of them in total, the longest production run of any surface combatant in American history. Yet while it is undoubtedly an excellent ship, one which has intercepted ballistic missiles over the Red Sea, launched Tomahawk strikes into Syria, and sailed alongside Allied fleets across the Pacific, it's now well over 3 decades old. And at $2.2 billion per vessel, building enough Burkes to keep up with the Chinese fleet approaching 400 warships is a daunting prospect, particularly when American shipyards are already stretched thin and struggling to find the skilled workers to staff them. The situation is made more acute by a detail that rarely makes headlines. Before the U.S. fleet gets larger, it is first expected to get smaller. As older vessels are retired, faster than new ones can be built, the Congressional Budget Office has projected a period of shrinkage before any recovery begins, meaning the gap with China could widen further still before American shipbuilding efforts start to close it. As Washington's search for the most viable way to match China's naval expansion goes on, some defense analysts have pointed to an unconventional solution, one that may not involve building anything at all. They believe the answer could be hiding in plain sight. South Korea and Japan are, on the surface, unlikely candidates for the title of world's best warship builders. Neither operate a global navy. Neither project military power beyond its immediate region. And yet, in the past 2 decades, both countries have been quietly transforming their naval industries from modest beginnings into world-class operations, driven by real and immediate security concerns. North Korea to the north, China to the west, and a regional environment that's grown more volatile with every passing year. That pressure has produced something unusual. Shipbuilders who are genuinely incentivized to deliver capable vessels quickly and at a controlled cost because their own national security depends upon it. What that industry has produced, in the waters off the Korean peninsula and in the ports of Japan's self-defense force, are vessels that have started to turn heads in Washington. The ships of South Korea's Sejong the Great class are named after figures from Korean history, scholars, philosophers, statesmen. The lead ship takes its name from the 15th century king, credited with creating the Korean alphabet, a figure so revered that his face appears on the country's 10,000 won banknote. It's a deliberate choice. They are statements of national identity and of national ambition. That ambition is written into every specification. At around 10,000 tons fully loaded, the Zhejiang the Great class sits in the same weight category as China's Type 55. But in the one area that matters most in modern-day maritime combat, missile capacity, it doesn't just match the Chinese ship, it beats it. Where the Type 55 carries 112 vertical launch cells, the Zhejiang carries 128, making it one of the most heavily armed surface combatants afloat. For comparison, the U.S. Navy's Arleigh Burke-class destroyers carry just 96. These cells can fire an extraordinary mix of weapons: surface-to-air missiles, capable of intercepting ballistic missiles in flight, anti-ship missiles, land attack cruise missiles, and anti-submarine rockets. South Korea's own defense agency puts it plainly: with this one ship, the Navy can cope with multiple simultaneous threats: anti-aircraft, anti-ship, anti-submarine, and ballistic missile defense, all at once. And then there's the price. Each Zhejiang the Great class destroyer cost around $925 million, less than half the price of an Arleigh Burke, and comparable to China's Type 55 at a fraction of the development cost. The story of how the second ship in the class was built is particularly telling. When Daewoo Shipbuilding proposed using a new construction technique, installing the Aegis combat system during the build rather than after hull completion, both the U.S. Navy and Lockheed Martin were deeply skeptical. The method had never been tried on an Aegis vessel before. After 6 months of persuasion, they agreed to a trial. The ship was completed a month ahead of schedule. Lockheed Martin's response, according to Korean sources, was one of quiet admiration. The real-world proof came in April 2009, when a Zhejiang the Great class destroyer became the first ship in the region to detect and track a North Korean ballistic missile launch, reporting the event to the Korean military before Japan or the United States had even processed the data. These were not ships built to impress on paper. They were built to perform. In November 2024, South Korea commissioned its fourth Zhejiang the Great class destroyer, the ROKS Jeongjo the Great, named after an 18th century Joseon king. It's the first of a new batch, and it represents a significant leap forward from its predecessors. Equipped with the latest generation of the Aegis combat system, it can now fire SM-3 missiles, capable of intercepting ballistic missiles in space, and SM-6 missiles that can engage targets over the horizon and even serve as anti-ship weapons in their own right. The class that began as a peer to China's Type 55 has evolved into something that exceeds it. 2 more ships are already under construction. Meanwhile, across the Korea Strait, Japan's Maya-class destroyers are also making waves. Close cousins of the Arleigh Burke class, they carry the same Aegis combat system, the same 96 vertical launch cells, and the same core suite of sensors and weapons. A Maya and a Burke can share targeting data in real time, coordinating their defenses as seamlessly as if they were ships of the same Navy. They are, in almost every operational sense, interchangeable with their American counterparts. Except for the price. A Maya costs less than half what an Arleigh Burke does. Japan builds them to specification, delivers them on schedule, and does so without the cost overruns that have become a defining feature of American naval procurement. Yet the savings are not the result of cutting corners. The Maya's sensors, according to one leading expert on war and strategy, stand at the very top end of the global spectrum. The Maya's capabilities were demonstrated with particular clarity in November 2022, when both ships in the class fired SM-3 ballistic missile interceptors on consecutive days at the Pacific Missile Range facility in Hawaii, successfully destroying targets outside the Earth's atmosphere in cooperation with the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Missile Defense Agency. It was the first time Japan had ever conducted such a test, and it validated something that defense planners in Washington had long suspected: that Japan's newest destroyers were operating at the absolute cutting edge of naval warfare. But the Maya is only half the story. Japan's Mogami-class frigates represent something genuinely new, a vision of what naval vessels might look like in the decades ahead. Though its armament is relatively modest compared to many other frigates, it's extraordinary in other ways. The entire ship is designed to be operated by a crew of just 90, roughly half the complement of comparable vessels in other navies. This is made possible by one of the most advanced combat information centers ever installed in a warship. A 360-degree circular screen wall that combines navigation, steering, weapons management, and damage control into a single integrated space, with augmented reality overlays that that allow a small crew to manage a large, complex vessel in the heat of combat. The Mogami's stealth profile was developed using technology borrowed directly from the Mitsubishi X-2 stealth fighter program, the same research that underpins Japan's next generation of combat aircraft. It can deploy unmanned underwater vehicles and unmanned surface vessels from a rear ramp, giving it capabilities that most navies won't field for another decade. And it costs around $370 million per ship, less than a third of the price of the Constellation-class frigate that Washington just canceled. Japan is now building its 12th Mogami-class frigate, the last planned ship of the initial run. However, an upgraded variant, larger, more heavily armed, and equipped with twice as many vertical launch shells, is already in development and scheduled to enter production in the coming years. Versions of the class planned for further down the line are expected to carry railguns and laser point defense systems. The ships being designed in Tokyo today are not catching up with the future. They're defining it. When it comes to both the South Korean and Japanese vessels, focusing on the numbers reveals a stark truth. South Korea's Sejong the Great outguns China's most powerful destroyer, the ship NATO classifies as a cruiser, by 16 missile cells, at roughly the same price. Japan's Maya-class destroyer matches the capability of America's most advanced Burke at half the cost. Japan's Mogami-class frigate does things no American frigate can currently do, with half the crew for a third of the price of the program Washington just canceled. And both countries built their ships on time and on budget every time. That last point is not a minor footnote. It goes to the heart of why American naval procurement has struggled for 2 decades. In the United States, defense contractors frequently operate on cost-plus contracts, meaning that if a program runs over budget, the government picks up the tab. The incentive to control costs is limited. The history of the Zumwalt, the littoral combat ship, and the Constellation all reflect in different ways the consequences of that system. In Japan, the dynamic is reversed. A shipbuilder's bid is treated as a fixed commitment. If the vessel is delivered under budget, the builder makes a larger profit. If costs overrun, the builder absorbs the difference. Carl Schuster, former director of operations at the U.S. Pacific Command's Joint Intelligence Center, describes the Japanese approach as simply, quote, much wiser. The numbers bear him out. So here's the question that a growing number of American defense analysts are asking with increasing urgency. If South Korea and Japan are building ships that are better armed, more affordable, and more reliably delivered than anything currently coming out of American yards, and if those ships already run on American weapons systems and can operate seamlessly alongside U.S. carrier groups, why can't the U.S. Navy just buy some? The issue is that there's a legal obstacle standing in the way. U.S. law currently prohibits the Navy from buying foreign-built warships or from having American vessels constructed in foreign shipyards, even those belonging to treaty allies. The intention behind the law is straightforward: to protect America's domestic shipbuilding industry, the hundreds of thousands of jobs it supports, and the industrial base that underpins the country's ability to build and repair its own fleet in wartime. These are not trivial concerns. In 2019, the U.S. shipbuilding industry accounted for nearly 400,000 jobs and contributed over $42 billion to GDP, with active shipyards spread across 29 states. In a country where defense manufacturing is both an economic and a political force, any proposal that could be perceived as threatening those jobs faces an immediate and powerful opposition. Shipbuilding representatives have made their position clear to Congress. The answer to America's naval shortfall is more investment in domestic yards, not outsourcing to allies. And yet the United States has a long and pragmatic history of overlooking abroad when its own industry cannot deliver what national security demands. The AV-8B Harrier jump jet, the aircraft that gave the Marine Corps its vertical takeoff capability for decades, was a British design, built under license in the U.S. The M777 howitzer, standard equipment for the U.S. Army and Marines, was designed in the U.K. The Constellation-class frigate itself was based on an Italian design. Washington's never been ideologically opposed to foreign expertise. It's simply drawn a line at foreign-built hulls. Carl Schuster believes that the time has now come to redraw that line. He says, quote, "Since shipyard availability is at a premium in the United States, having a portion of that work done in Japan would address that problem until America can refurbish and expand its shipyards, a 10-year process in most defense analysts' eyes." However, Some believe a different approach is possible, one that takes the best from other nations without actually outsourcing work to them. Nick Childs, a senior naval analyst at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, argues, quote, "I think the answer is to learn from the way they do it, rather than get them to do it for you." By adopting foreign contracting models, workforce training programs, and accountability structures, perhaps the United States can close the gap. Yet this position implicitly assumes that American shipyards can be reformed quickly enough to implement these systems. Given the track record of the past 2 decades, that could be a risky assumption to make. While Washington debates, others have already decided. In August 2025, Australia announced it had selected Japan's Mogami design as the basis for its new general-purpose frigate fleet, up to 11 ships, with the first 3 to be built in Japanese shipyards, before production transitions to Australian yards. It's a significant moment. Australia is one of America's closest allies, a member of the AUKUS Security Pact, a country whose navy trains alongside the U.S. fleet and whose strategic interests are bound tightly to Washington's. And it looked at the same question American analysts have been wrestling with. Where do we get capable, affordable ships quickly? And gave a clear answer. With China's 10th Type 55 having entered service in early 2026, there are signs, tentative but real, that the conversation in the United States is shifting. The question of allied shipbuilding, once a fringe argument made by a handful of analysts, is now being discussed at the highest levels of American defense policy. The ships are proven, the alliances are strong, and for the first time in a long time, the solution to one of America's most pressing strategic challenges is not something that needs to be invented or funded or tested. It's already out there, ready to sail. All that's required is the will to act.